Hello, this is a walkthrough of how to use the terminal and your home directories on a Mac. So what I've done is I have actually started with a whole new user in macOS Catalina. If you don't know what version of macOS you're using, you can go to the Apple icon, go to About This Mac, and you can see I'm on the newest version of Catalina here. So this, by default, is a Mac. The settings and the way we set up a Mac for development, right? For writing scripts and working with these sorts of files are actually a little bit different than how we work on Windows. So in the Python bootcamp that was just yesterday, we actually noted that this was a problem, right? The methods that we used to prepare to write Python scripts didn't work by default. So the first thing I want to show you is this. If we open up our Spotlight search here and we type TextEdit, let's say I wanted to create a Python file. Well, by default here, I've opened TextEdit and I can say I want to print hello world. This is our classic thing. This should print hello world. Well, if I go to File, and I go and let's say I want to save this out. So if while I'm in here, I go and I save, it'll come up with a pop-up window. Now I want this to be a Python file. So I say, okay, I want this to, maybe I'll just save, in my downloads just for fun. And I'll call this hello_script.py. I do this and I see suddenly I can't save this document with extension py. The required extension is rich text format. You can choose to use both so that your file name ends in py.rtf, but by default, I cannot save it as a Python file. Mac is trying to make sure I don't make a mistake and run some code that could harm my machine. It's because TextEdit is not meant to create Python files by default. On a Mac, we would have to move to terminal. And now, as of macOS, I think Mojave, the default text editor on the Mac is Nano. And so Nano is a text editor. So if I were to remember, I have my object verb error code type of approach. So I want to use text editor, right? Editor, Mac terminal, or just say Mac. And I can actually see it's already suggesting terminal. If I didn't know what a terminal was, so by default this terminal here looks like this. I actually don't like this design, so I'm going to click up here. I'm going to go to Preferences. I'm then going to go to Profiles, and I'm going to choose maybe this Homebrew profile. One of the nice things that I like is if I change my basic default, this one I want, well, I'll just choose Homebrew for now. I don't want to actually go through and change everything. Let's add like Homebrew. I can automatically just create a new one like that. I'm going to actually go with this one. The other thing I might want to do is in this section, I might want to change I can change things about the window size, the shell itself, different things that I run when it gets started. There's a lot of things you can do here. I'm actually going to change the font really quick so you can actually see it. It's always useful. I'm going to double the font to size 24. Now whenever I do this, I always have to relaunch a Homebrew terminal. You can just double click and I'll see that. I'm going to actually make this even larger. Change, and I'm going to do this size maybe 26. This should be good. Yeah, 27 point. Yeah, so that's really large. That's what happens when you forget. You do this once normally, and your Mac will save it basically forever. So if you're like me, you'll forget what size you set it to, and you'll make it giant. Actually, maybe that's not. Oh, all right. So clearly it takes. There we go. 20 is good. Okay, let's leave it on 20. I sort of like this size. So now we can see this very clearly, and this is called terminal. So this is that scary thing that you see people use in the when people are working in like the the movies, right? This is the command line in Mac, and just like we talked about in the boot camp. Oop, I'm gonna actually just get out of that. LS is list, so I can list all of my files. You can also send commands, so I can use the common command LAH to tell me to list the attributes and do them in human readable format. If I didn't know that, I can always man ls, bring up the manual page. I can press the down arrow key on the keyboard to scroll through the man page. I gotta tell you, everyone runs into the problem they can't leave the man page. You use the Q key on the keyboard to do that. So again, man ls. I use the down arrow key, and then I use Q to get out of that. Nice. So now I learned a little bit about ls. I know I can list, I can pass different things into it and see different results, which is nice. So back to the problem we had. We have this hello world.py file that we want to make. How are we going to do it? The first question to always answer on terminal is, where are we? The terminal exists at a certain file location, at a certain working directory. For us to be able to use the terminal to create a Python file, we first have to know where we are. It's not like in Finder where I can visually see the structure of the files. It's different. What I need to do is I need to figure out my current working directory. Now, remember our Stack Overflow approach. We can figure this out. Current working working. You can tell it's been a long day. Directory. And in my case, I want terminal, the Mac terminal. And maybe Mac OS, right? See how I'm iterating here. Display current path and terminal only. And here I see someone has told me I've SSH'd into a computer, so I can't use a GUI to access the path name. Is there a way that you can see the path directly on terminal without having to use Nautilus? Totally. Do you mean PWS and ls to see the working directory and list the files? Exactly. So let's try that. Now, note, you should always know exactly what these mean. But in my case, I know PWD is safe. So you always want to know what the code does before you just randomly see it on Stack Overflow and try it out. But in my case, I see that I'm located at users Kyle. And knowing a little bit about macOS is important. I know if you're a Mac user, you might not have had to dive in to learn how your computer works. It just works. But so I was a Windows user for a long time. I recently switched to a Mac. I have to say I spend less time fixing things on my Mac. But the negative of that is now we have to go and figure out, how does our Mac work? And how is it different than Windows? And how can we do some coding on this Mac? They're a great platform for coding. I really love it. It's a great experience, but we have to do a little setup. And so that's what we're going to do today. First, we know where we are. In my case, I actually want to be sitting in my downloads. A lot of Mac users will work in their downloads, right? I could also maybe want to sit on the desktop if I work on my desktop. So in my case, I'm going to, and actually what I'll do is I'll first change directory into the downloads. So if I ls here, I can see all of my files are here: desktop, downloads, movies, and this is my home directory. So if I cd $home, $home, this means to my home directory. $home is something called an environmental variable. It's how my computer knows where home is. This will always take me back home, no matter where I am. And if I print working directory pwd, boom, this is where I'm at. So now I feel comfortable being able to take a look at these results. And so I know where I am. I've tried to save out this Python file. I know that I'm sitting at users Kyle. I want to change directory into my downloads. So I cd, if I can spell correctly, downloads. And now when I've typed down, I'm going to want to press tab to tab complete this path, so I know that it's downloads. Now you can see Kyle at my computer name, and here instead of the squiggly, which is my local directory in Mac, also known as a tilde, yes, tilde. I call it the squiggly, but you could call it tilde. And this is my downloads. So if I print working directory, I'm in my downloads. If I ls, there's nothing in there. So I'll click OK. Oh, note, good point. Catalina has extensive security. So you need to allow Terminal to access your downloads folder. I'm going to click OK. And now it will be able to see my downloads folder. So I will ls again, and it tells me there's nothing in there. Now remember from the walkthrough, we made a directory with makedir, mkdir. I'm going to make dir called example Python. And now if I ls-lah just like before, I can see I have my example Python. These dot files here are something unique. If I just ls, you won't see that, so you can kind of ignore that. But this is example Python, and I'm going to cd into example Python. And in here, I want to create an example Python. Now, if I print working directory, here is where we are, users, Kyle, my username, downloads, example Python. Now, if you wanted to find this in Finder, this is a little bit harder to do. So by default, what we want to do is we want to navigate to our home and make sure we can easily find this in Finder. So in my case, I'm going to navigate to home. I'm going to use Command and the up arrow to navigate around the interface here. And what I actually want to do is press back once. And the reason why is because I want to actually add or move back out of this directory. Another way I can do that is if I go to, say, the home directory here, and let's say I want to have a shortcut to, say, music. I can click and drag this over to my favorites, hovering over until I see it down here, drop, and now music is available here. In my case, I'll normally work in my desktop in downloads if I've installed Box. So on this is just a vanilla, totally new Mac setup, so I won't be able to see it. Another thing you can do is if you go to Preferences under Finder, and you go to Advanced, so I just went to Finder, Preferences, and Advanced, you can click on Show All File Name Extensions. I would do this. And there's also something called Show Warning Before Changing an Extension. I would remove this. And so this lets us change file extensions whenever we want. Note, if you uncheck this like I just did, and you change a docx to a txt file, it's not going to work anymore, right? So you can break files once you've unchecked this. In the same way, show all file name extensions. If you don't want to see file name extensions, if that confuses you, and you check this, it will confuse you, right? So it's not always the best, but this is my setup for how I like to see things in Finder. So now in our case, we want to take a look at and create a text file. So the first thing, remember, we couldn't use TextEdit originally. So now let's say I'm just going to click cancel and cancel out of this, and I just want to save an example text file. So I'm going to File, Save, and I just want to save this as a, just a, I guess a rich text document's fine. I'm going to save that in download, and I'll just call this Python underscore, or Python underscore examples. And actually, I don't want to save it in downloads. I want to save it in example Python. So I'm going to click in there. I'm going to click Save. And now I've saved out a rich text file here. So if I ls, I can see Python example in here. The same way, if I go into Downloads in my Finder, I can see example Python. And you can see that because I've allowed file name extensions, I can see the RTF. By default, if I go to Preferences and I uncheck this and I were to refresh this, well, in this case it's going to show, but sometimes file name extensions will not show. And so that can be really annoying actually if you don't know what type of file things are. So now, because I've disabled this, if I go back into TextEdit and I say, okay, now I want to print hello space world, and I want to say file, save, okay, and I want to save it in here, and I want to call it Python example.py. I click this, and I still can't do it. So I've asked it to not warn me if I change the file extension, but still I'm not allowed to do it. Very sad. So what do? Well, we're back to that terminal. So we've made our Finder as nice as we can. We have all these settings here to access our downloads, the desktop. You might want to add, say, your Box if you want to log into Box and work from there. And so we've made the Finder. We know how to get to things through Go here. We can access our utilities and things like this if we want to work with utilities. One thing I like to do, if you right-click on Terminal and you go to Options, Keep in Dock, that'll move it over. I like to stick it right over here because it's right here. Stack Overflow and Terminal are like the way I live my life, so that's kind of nice. And so now what we have here is we have terminal, everything's set up perfectly. We're ready to do some development. And now what we need to do is create our Python script. And so we need to create a file that has Python in it. Now we could use Jupyter notebooks, we could use, PyCharm, we could use an IDE, we could use anything. But in our case, we just want a single file. Like, it's not like we need code highlighting, a notebooks platform, a data analytics team, a data management platform, a data lake, scalable analytics. We don't care about all that. We just literally want to make a Python file. So the way we're going to do this is actually using touch, the touch command. Now, let's try to man touch, because we might want to get a feel for how this works. Man touch. So touch, change file access and modification types. The touch utility sets the modification and access times of file. If any file does not exist, it is created with default permissions. I'm going to use Q again to quit out. So now I can touch example py.py, and now I've created my file. I ls just the same. I see example_py.py. So much nicer than all the things we struggled with. You see now why everyone uses this nice frightening black box. And so now what I want to do is example py.py. I'm actually going to open it in Nano. Remember how I mentioned that was our default text editor. Example, and remember, tab complete. Here we go. So now I can print hello, hello, word, world, orld, world, print hello world, and we have that, we just typed that in. Now note, at this point you might be quite confused, because what you see here is the caret sign and a letter, and this is super confusing, right? I'm actually using a Windows keyboard right now. I know that's kind of weird to know because this is Mac, but I'm using a Bluetooth Windows-based keyboard. And so on the Windows-based keyboard, this is going to be my control key. I think it's the same on Mac, but it has a little caret on it. So that little symbol, you just want to find that on your keyboard. It's right on the far left, and then find that. And so in our case, we want to write this out. You might wonder, how can I learn about Nano? So if I, again, Stack Overflow, Nano, how to use. The tool is called Nano. It says using commands in Nano. That's kind of nice. This is way more advanced than we want, so I'm going to go back. One of my things to suggest is that you always try to check out Stack Overflow. But in this case, we might be able to just say how to use Nano text editor. Right? Oh, it comes right out. Awesome. We click here. You can see how this is confusing. Thanks, Linux Eyes, for making it excellent, at least more excellent. Wow, lots of ads here. It's a little slow. Pretty slow. Well, if this would load, I bet I would have a great time being able to view this. So if I read that tutorial, you'll see that it actually, if you go through, we're going to use the command and O. So hold down command and then O. It's going to ask, what file name would you like to write? In our case, to accept this, we can just press the enter key or the return key, and it writes one line. Now I can hold down control again and go to X for exit. Note that all of these can be accessed through that command. And now if I ls, I can see example py.py is here. By default, if I want to use Python in Mac, if I haven't installed Anaconda, so let's say this is just a normal Mac, if I type Python, that's Python 2.7.1.6. You might think, Kyle, you told us, well, Uku told us that Python 2.7.6 is not as supportive, right? It's not something we want to learn. So what else could we do? Well, as I mentioned before, we can download the excellent Anaconda data science package, the standalone Anaconda installer. And I'm actually going to go through this with you now. So I'm going to allow. Oh, I'm not on Windows. The simple things are the most challenging. There's some sort of philosophy in there, perhaps. I'm going to cancel out of this Windows install so the Mac install will go a little faster. And we're going to go through an Anaconda install together because we'd like to have a nicer version of this working. So we're waiting for the download. This can take some time. All right, I'll double click on it. It'll bring up the traditional Mac installer. I'm going to click continue, continue, continue. Nothing like accepting that license agreement without reading it. Install, and it's installing for me. And it's running some nice package scripts for me. I greatly appreciate this. Less than a minute remaining. I always love when it says that. It seems to stay on that for at least 12 minutes. I don't know if you've found that. I certainly have. So while we wait for that to complete, I want to talk a little bit about if I wanted to edit this Python, for example, myself. So we mentioned that we have this very nice file. If I were to do Nano and just the same thing I did before, example py.py, I can see the file itself and start working with it. So I use touch to create that Python script. I know where this is, so if I print working directory, I can see that this file is users Kyle downloads example Python, and it exists here. Another cool pro tip I want to show you while I'm killing time waiting for this to complete. If you right click on this and you hold down the command key, see this? See how these change? This is a secret part of macOS where I can go to copy example py as path name. And not only is this the location of the file, but this is the actual path to the file. I'm going to just command paste here. Excuse me. Oh, I were to copy it again. So copy as path name. And I just paste it in there for you. And now you see users Kyle downloads example Python example RTF. So that's the full path to that file. Very nice. In my case, I'm just going to delete this. I also think it's possible that this might be a little bit stalled because I was using Python. So I'm just going to X out of my terminal here really quickly, see if that helps anything. One of the nice things about terminal is that I can always open a new window with profile. Now I actually use a different terminal application called iTerm, but either one works, and it's totally up to you which one you want to use. Again, I shouldn't have joked that this would take 12 minutes because it seems like it's actually taking some time. So I just want to talk about where applications are actually stored on your Mac. So here we have your applications, and so you can see all the traditional applications on the Mac, and this will actually be stored once it's eventually done installing in this location. It will be stored right inside of there. Inside of here are all the kind of the secret utilities here. Has a nice disk utility, Bluetooth file exchange, activity monitor for if you want to know what's running on your Mac, and things like that. Well, sure is taking some time. So glad we didn't do this before we started, That would have been so much easier if I had done this before. All right, so we'll take a quick pause here, and then we'll wait for it to complete. So the issue that I ran into, just to highlight it for everyone, see how it says installer app wants to access system UI server.app. After an update, it didn't seem like that was coming up, so I had a security issue, and so it didn't complete originally because of that. And so now it'll just complete now. If I want, I can continue to install PyCharm. I said there was some issue because I've actually already installed it. I'll move the rest to the trash. And so now if I go to my applications, I'll see here a Anaconda Navigator icon. Let's actually see. The other way you can do it is you can always search here and look for Anaconda. And sometimes, by default, you might not see it as it's kind of starting to index. But if you can't, you can always search for it like that and then find the Anaconda Navigator.app. I can double click on this to open Anaconda Navigator. So again, I just went up here. I searched for Anaconda 3, the folder came up. If you're wondering where this is, you might want to actually change your Finder to show the actual path here, so I can change my sidebar. I think it is. Maybe it's general. It's a way to show the whole path. And I forget how to show that because you do it once and then you never do it again. Maybe it's actually under this section here. Well, let's solve the problem together as always. So I can go to show path in Finder. All right. Now scroll down here. View and show path bar. Excellent. We've done it. So I'll go over here to open up my Finder first. Then I'll go to View and Show Path Bar. And now I can see my path. So I see that I'm in Kyle, Opt, Anaconda 3, Anaconda Navigator. Now I always know where I am. That's kind of nice. Okay, I can click OK and don't show again. I think I've clicked on Anaconda Navigator twice, so It's loading twice. But you can install Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook, Orange, that's a data mining platform. Jupyter Notebook is those notebooks that store our analysis and the results. Jupyter Lab is built on top of Jupyter Notebooks. It's kind of the next generation. You can install one of my favorite things, RStudio, Qt Console, PyQt. It's a graphical user interface engine kind of IDE that lets you do inline figures, multi-line editing, and things like that. It's just a way to write Python. GlueViz is multi-dimensional database. I really like GlueViz. I think it should be more popular. And Spider is another Python IDE which has advanced editing, debugging, and things like that. So we've done a ton of stuff here. We got Anaconda Navigator running. We are about to install Jupyter Notebook. I'll just let that sit. That actually takes some substantial time. So we've ran Jupyter Notebooks here. We have Anaconda installed. And now we want to go back and open up, and I'm going to right click again, go to new window with profile and my homebrew profile. So it's nice and big for all of you. And now what we have is we have we want to remember CD downloads. Right? I want to find my downloads. I also want a CD. I'm going to tab complete because I don't remember the name. It's example Python. And then I'm going to ls, and I see my Python file here. And so now I want to run this, right? So I might first want to say which Python is my default Python. Still Python 2.7, so it's clear that Anaconda didn't get added to the path. This is a common problem we can talk through. I'll actually do another video on what to do when you run into this. But we can still submit this version to our default Python on the terminal. And this will be Python 2.7 because that's the one it's referring to. Let me actually check to see if Python 3 is still Python 2.7. Ah, okay. So this is another thing. If you want, you can install the command line developer tools. These are actually needed to do a lot of developing. It is included with Xcode. It's a solid amount of space, so I'm not going to install it right now. This is not my main user. I just made this user to show you. So I'm not going to install it right now, but it's great to have. So I'm just going to click cancel. We won't start that up. We're just going to run it in regular old Python 2. So I'm going to tell terminal, take the example py.python and send it to the Python 2.7 executable. I'm asking Python, please run this Python script. It does, and it says hello world. Hey, we did it. What we couldn't do during the boot camp, we did here today. And remember, I can nano, just like we did before, tab complete, print hello world. So I've printed hello world. And this is all without having to really well, we did a solid amount of work actually, but you know, we're moving on through. We even added the path name to Finder. So I remember I can go view, show path bar. Very nice that we can see this path bar all the time. So if I go to my downloads, I can see where I am. That's always nice. So this is an excellent way to get started in using Python. So remember, we used the touch command to create a file. That's touch. We used manual, short for manual, to do that. We used ls to look for things. We passed flags or arguments into ls. We found our home directory in Finder. We found our home directory in the terminal. We learned all different ways to do that. We learned why you can't necessarily do stuff by default in macOS. It's trying to protect us from these things. We also learned how to start up Anaconda Navigator. Now remember, I always want to right-click Options, Keep in Dock, so I can keep that running in my dock whenever I want. I can put it right over here. These are my development section. And we're on our way to be working on this Mac machine. I hope this was helpful for all Mac users. I know it can be a challenge, but I really do love the Mac for development. It's what keeps me in the Apple ecosystem. Again, this is Kyle Monhan, Senior Data Science Specialist with TTS. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope you all have a great boot camp.